Okay, let's get into this. What happens when you come across a story and the main character is just, well, vivid, memorable, but you can't really pin them down?
Right.
Like no solid name, no known family, just this presence on the page.
Yeah.
Today we're doing a deep dive into the very first chapters of Lu Sun's The True Story of Ah Q, using some material from the Archie YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal, really, is to try and figure out who this Ah Q character is. What can we actually know about him, especially since the author seems to deliberately obscure things? And why does that even matter?
Well, what jumps out right away is the author wrestling with how to even start. It's not just about telling the story, but what kind of story is it?
What?
He goes through all these categories: official history, autobiography, unauthorized biography, legend, and none of them seem to fit quite right.
Yeah.
So that tells you immediately, okay, this isn't your standard biography. The ambiguity is baked in from the start.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that leads us straight into the first big puzzle, his identity, or lack thereof. Let's start with the surname.
Okay.
There's that moment where Cow seems like it might be it. And the reason is almost, well, absurd. Mr. Chow's son passed the county exam.
Yeah. And Q, probably after a bit too much wine.
Tries to sort of latch on to that success, hinting he's somehow related, maybe even senior to this successful family.
It's this desperate kind of boasting, isn't it? Especially given how poor he clearly is. It really speaks to that human need for some kind of respect, even if it's built on, well, nothing solid.
And you have to think about the time period, right? Lineage status that was hugely important.
Absolute paramount. So for Q to lack even a definite surname, that automatically puts him at the very bottom rung of society. His trying to claim the Chow name, even vaguely, shows this deep, deep yearning for some kind of validation in that really rigid social structure.
But it gets shut down so brutally. Mr. Chow just completely denies it, furious, and then that very public slap. It's like, bang, reality hits.
Yeah, a stark reminder of his actual place.
And the result. His surname stays completely unknown. It feels like the author's just stripping away even that basic piece of identity. So right away, he's defined by what's missing. Almost like a symbol for, the nameless masses.
It does make you wonder, why start with such deliberate vagueness? Is Q meant to be just one guy, or is he, standing in for something much broader?
A type, maybe.
Could be. Keeping him undefined lets the author make a wider commentary, perhaps.
It's a really interesting thought. And the mystery just keeps going with his personal name.
Yes.
Q. Everyone called him that when he was alive. But apparently after he died,
yeah,
nobody ever mentioned any other name. It's like, Q, is it? Full stop.
And the author even talks about struggling with how to write down that Q. He considers Chinese characters that sound similar, right?
Yeah, one meaning kassia, like a type of bark.
Suggesting maybe something superficial.
Could be. And the other meaning nobility.
Which is obviously deeply ironic, given Q's situation.
Totally. But neither character felt right because, well, there was nothing else to connect them to. No other name, no birthday parties with fancy invitations, using a formal name.
No brothers to establish any kind of family line. It's this process of elimination that just highlights how alone he is, how disconnected.
And then there's that little bit with Mr. Chow's son again, the one who passed the exam.
Oh, right, him.
He kind of blames the New Youth magazine and, the Western alphabet for the confusion over Q's name.
Which is interesting contextually, because New Youth was a big deal then, pushing modern ideas, criticizing tradition.
So the son's comment is sort of a dig at those new trends.
Exactly, a clash of old and new ideas playing out. And then the author apparently tries to find them in legal records.
Yeah. Fruitless, of course.
Yeah.
It sounds almost comical, this serious attempt to find official documentation for someone who just slipped through the cracks.
So in the end, the author kind of gives up and just uses the Western letter Q.
Almost reluctantly, it sounds like. He feels a bit ashamed, like he's just following some foreign trend.
But it perfectly underscores the main point. The very basis of this person's identity is just shaky. Undefined.
Okay, so name. Uncertain. What about where he's from? His origins.
Same problem, really. You know that old custom of identifying people by their district?
Hmm.
Well, that doesn't work if you don't even know the surname for sure.
Right, because the Chiu thing didn't stick.
Exactly. We know he lives in Weishuang, this village, but apparently he moves around a lot for odd jobs. He's not consistently there.
So even his tie to the village is a bit loose.
It seems so. The only thing the author feels certain about is the character used to write Zhuang in Weishuang. That character, at least, feels right.
Wow. That's That's a tiny sliver of certainty and a whole lot of ambiguity.
It really is. It feels like the author is building this whole story on a foundation of, well, not knowing. We're being told up front, this person's existence, biographically speaking, is a blur.
Okay, so we've established he's this kind of shadowy figure, lacking the basics, but we do start to see glimpses of his actual life and his, let's say, his very unique way of dealing with things, what the author called his victories.
The famous spiritual victories.
Despite having no real background to speak of, he makes these grand, vague claims, right, like, we used to be much better off than you.
Yeah, this completely unproven assertion of a grander past.
But look where he lives, in the temple for the local god.
Exactly. Not exactly the sign of fallen gentry. And his work is just odd jobs. Cutting wheat one day, poling a boat the next, whatever comes up.
It shows this huge gap, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between this inflated idea he has of himself and his actual pretty marginal existence. Living at a temple back then, that was really scraping by.
Definitely. And the villagers, well, they seem to treat him just like that, as temporary help.
Useful when needed.
But totally forgotten once the job's done. It's purely about the labor. Someone might say, oh, he's a good worker, and Akyu just beams with pride.
Completely missing any potential condescension.
Absolutely oblivious. And that points to something really central about him. This incredible talent for self-deception.
He seems to genuinely believe he's better than everyone else.
It seems so. Looking down on the villagers he works for, even the local scholars like Mr. Chiao and Mr. Qian, he has these fantasies that his sons may be much greater.
Which is just wild considering he has no family we know of.
Totally baseless, pure wishful thinking.
And when he goes to town sometimes, it seems to just reinforce this weird self-image, but in funny ways.
Like how he picks up town slang.
Yeah. Calling a long bench a straight bench, because that's what they do in town, and then sneering at the villagers for using the wrong word. Or complaining about shallots and fish.
It's like he adopts these superficial markers of being in the know without any real understanding, just mimicking.
And then there are his physical issues. The ringworm scars.
Ah, yes. Very sensitive about those.
Incredibly sensitive. To the point where he makes up these bizarre rules about words. Anything sounding remotely like ringworm, bright, light, lamp, candle becomes taboo.
It's almost darkly funny, the lengths he goes to.
But his reaction when someone breaks the taboo, that's revealing.
He flies into a rage.
Yeah, glares, curses. But usually picks on someone weaker, someone he thinks he can beat.
And the irony is he usually loses those fights anyway.
Exactly. Which brings us to the spiritual victories.
This is the core of his psychology, isn't it? When he's undeniably beaten physically, his mind just flips the script.
He finds a way to win internally.
Precisely. Gets beaten up by someone he calls his son. In his head, it becomes, I beat my son. It's a fascinating, though maybe disturbing way that powerless can kind of create their own reality to cope psychologically.
And the other villagers, the idlers, they figure this out pretty fast.
They do. They start mocking him before he can even start his mental gymnastics, shouting things like, this is a man beating a beast.
Trying to preempt his self-deception.
Yeah, and Akikyu tries to counter weakly, beating an insect or something like that. But even when he verbally gives in, they often keep hitting him.
Yet somehow, in his own mind, he still comes out on top. He's the foremost self-believer, as the author puts it.
It really lays bare that desperate human drive to hold on to some scrap of self-worth, even when facing constant humiliation. His inner story is his only refuge, really.
Even when he's relaxing, like at the wine shop, it's the same pattern.
Boasting, arguing, somehow ending up feeling like he won, even if he didn't.
And gambling, too. That description of him betting on the green dragon, the stakeholders chant, it's vivid. But of course, he usually loses.
But even then, he finds a way to enjoy it, maybe living vicariously through someone else's win.
Until that one time at the festival, he actually wins.
A rare moment of real luck. Drums, gongs, he wins a pile of cash. $2 on Heavenly Gate, he shouts.
But it disappears almost instantly. A fight breaks out, chaos, and his winnings are just gone.
Snatched. And he can't even figure out who did it because they weren't locals. Another reminder he's an outsider.
And how does he cope with being robbed? In classic Akyu style.
The ultimate spiritual victory, perhaps.
He slaps himself. Hard.
Right, imagining one self beating the other self.
So in his mind, he's conquered the situation again. He actually feels satisfied, the text says, and falls asleep even though his face is stinging.
It's remarkable, a really extreme coping mechanism. It just shows how deeply ingrained this need is for him to reframe reality, to insulate himself from how painful his life actually is.
So wrapping up this first look, we're left with this picture, right? A man defined by what we don't know, name, family, origins.
A lot of blanks.
But through these little stories, these glimpses, we see his life, his coping mechanisms, these bizarre victories, and this unwavering ability to believe his own narrative.
And the key thing for you, the listener, is this. Even without all the usual biographical facts, Ah Q's story is incredibly powerful. It makes us look at how we perceive ourselves, how society works, how identity gets built, or maybe just imagined, especially when things are tough or unclear.
Yeah, it makes you think about how we all interpret things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How we shape our own stories, maybe smooth over the awkward bits, especially when the facts aren't exactly flattering.
Exactly. And it leaves us with a really interesting question to chew on. Why does a story with so many fundamental unknowns feel so compelling, so true in a way?
Right. What makes a life story true anyway? Is it just the checkable facts? Or is it the impact, the feelings it evokes, the questions it makes us ask?
Diving into Ah Q's fragmented beginnings really pushes you to think about what biography even is and the nature of the stories we tell about others and definitely about ourselves.